Morning. I'm Quentin Cook, and I'd like to introduce Luke Archer, a friend of mine of a good number of years now. We came together because I heard of this bloke who was doing something on verbal Aikido and was intrigued and reached out to ask him if he wanted to introduce verbal Aikido at a seminar I developed called Aiki Extended. Um, Luke, would you like to tell us a bit more about your background and how Aikido came into your life?
Sure. Wow, where to start? Well, I'm Irish, as you probably got from the accent. But I've been living in France for 30 years. Um, I think a good place to start the origins of this is a kind of a simple thing that I think many people can relate to is being bullied. When I was in school and even outside school, even at home, there was I had to deal with both verbal, physical bullying. It was something that was quite present in my life, and I think there's a lot of things that happen when you're a kid. You just think it's normal. It's just no matter what happens, it's just normal. But um, so I kind of developed, I think a lot of and strategies to manage that, and I think a lot of it was avoidance, really, or even distraction at the time. But so later, I came to France, and I was a communication and language teacher, and I was interested in martial arts, but I wasn't really into the kind of the hard hitting and all that sort of stuff. And so I discovered Aikido. And fell in love with the philosophy. Essentially, I really liked this idea of the intention to protect yourself and the other person. Ueshiba, the founder of Aikido, was intent on this idea of it being an art of peace, and not. And I think one of his quotes is, what we need in this era is an art of peace, not an art of war." Um, Him after he spent a lot of time as a martial artist himself, and in uh, you know in conflictual situations, and to come to that realization, I think is pretty important. So after, I said, being a communication teacher for many years, I started my own company to help other teachers to develop their skills in the classroom. And one of my clients asked me, Luke, can you develop a training for us that helps the teachers manage difficult students? That's kind of where it started. And because I'd done Aikido at the time, I thought, that'd be good to have some sort of verbal Aikido. And that's kind of where it started. After that, there was people got really interested in it, and um, they suggested I should write a book about it, which I did. This is back in 2000, I think 11. I wrote the first book on it, and uh, and since then it's become all I do, essentially.
Okay,
Uh, yeah.
so what is verbal Aikido and how does it differ from other communication or conflict resolution methods?
Well, yeah, if you look at the large majority, I think all the communication and conflict management strategies that exist nowadays, you'll see that it's very much, do this, do A, B, C, D, and you're done. And anyone who's familiar with martial arts, it's kind of like a kata. You do a sequence, and that's good. And it can work. And you take things something like, and I absolutely love NVC, Nonviolent Communication, by Marshall Rosenberg, wonderful wonderful guy who did a lot to help the world. But there's a formula where it's, you share the facts, then you talk about feelings, and then needs, and then you express a desire, and that it is wonderful, and that can help in lots of situations. But then it starts to become, if people kind of see you coming, then they're like, okay, here we go again, and it becomes formulaic, and it's kind of almost mechanic. It can be almost mechanical, and like any kata, it's not going to work in all the situations. And I think that's really where VA differentiates from a lot of these interesting, albeit kind of fixed um, strategies to manage conflict, is that verbal aikido is it's there is moves. There's many techniques. I would say there's at this stage there's potentially hundreds of different techniques that actually exist. Uh, Yet it's not a formula of doing you do this, you do that. It's a dance. It's a dance in which there are many moves you can do, and you're moving between essentially. We can talk about it a little bit later, but you're moving between me, you, us, and there's like dozens at least of different me moves. There's dozens of you moves. There's dozens of us moves, and depending on what's happening, you're gonna shift between those moves in order to accompany what's coming at you. Um, so I think that's one of the main differences is it's not a kata, it's not a fixed sequence. It's much more an art, a true art form where you're going to blend with whatever's coming at you and accompany it until that energy of tension or the energy of conflict kind of de-escalates into a simple conversational energy, which I think everyone's familiar with.
Okay, well, I can relate to that because, as you know, I do Aikido on the mat, and I reached a stage some years ago where I realized that uh, I was learning all these techniques effectively to throw them away because none of them are perfect in any particular situation. Every situation is unique. So you're just hoping that you've built enough muscle memory and join the dots enough that you just do the right thing at the moment. It becomes very instinctive. You can't afford to think about what you're going to do. You've just got to do it. And it sounds to me that that's what you're saying, that for verbal Aikido to really work well, you've kind of got to just have done enough for the right thing to pop into your head at that moment in time.
So true, so true. I mean, and it's like, I mean, the comparison with martial arts is such it can be so profoundly helpful for people when you're developing it. There's no there's no art that you learn and you'll be good at it straight away. It takes and VA training, verbal Aikido training is the development of reflexes. And essentially, this is, I mean, you're familiar with this as anyone who's done martial arts is you learn the techniques and then you kind of forget them. You let go of them and you allow your posture and your presence in connection with what's going on kind of surface. And the techniques, because like you said, you've got that sort of muscle memory and they come back and they I guess they meet with whatever's coming at you at that time, and you have lots of choices because you know all these different techniques, but you're not necessarily doing it consciously. It becomes part of your unconscious. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think your students have an expectation that, they attend a few classes and then everything's going to be perfect? Or do you think they really understand it's kind of a lifetime's work?
Uh, I think it's natural for people beginning something or discovering a technique to think yes, so this I'm going to do this a few times and I'll be good. And you will to a certain extent. In other words, right from one session, you'll encounter maybe a handful of techniques which you can then bring into the real world and apply, and you may get some pretty good effects from it. But I think the idea of, like you said, expectations is important. The kind of baseline for verbal aikido is from conflict to conversation. It's not necessarily from conflict to resolution, but it's at least if you're in that conversation energy, well, then I mean, the resolution is going to be a lot easier to find if you've just de-escalated the tension in it. But essentially, I think one of uh, the key things, and this is why we work so hard on what we talk about posture, is that we'll give you techniques. Okay, so the technique is essentially what you say. And I mean, it is easy well, it's simple. Let's just say it's not easy. So it's simple in its form. Even we work with kids from 5 years up to doing this, and they get it. Um, I mean, even there's a kid Baptiste over here in France who he's 6 years old. After about 3 sessions, he comes up to me and he says, "Luke, I know what verbal aikido is." And so we're in the classroom with the teacher, and I sit down beside him and I say, "So what is verbal aikido?" And he says, "It's when you can protect yourself, but you also protect the other person." I remember thinking, well, my work here is done. Okay, if a 6 year old can get that, well, then, and it's reassuring as well. When I go into larger conferences and in big multinational companies, I'm able to say to them, 5 year olds can get this. So I'm pretty confident that you will get it. But it's simple. The concepts are simple, but doesn't mean it's easy. It takes all this practice. And even when we go into the schools, we'll do a first session and we'll give them a little technique, for example, just something like say somebody throws a simple attack at you saying, "Oh, you're so incompetent," and you might say, "Well, what do you mean?" So that'll give you a little bit of space. The other person it pushes the other person to kind of reformulate, etc. It's obviously not over yet, but you've got a little bit of space in that. But of course, if you say, "What do you mean?" right? Well, yeah, that's going to create an escalation rather than de-escalation. So the technique essentially is what you say. But you can, if you say something that is uh, that's outside that sense of posture that we're looking for, with a true intention to understand the other person in that's in posture too. When you say, "What do you mean?" Well, then, you know, you can use all the techniques you like, all the words you like, all the trained phrases that you're meant to use. But if you're not with that sincere posture of wanting to understand the other person, then it's going to be worthless. It's not actually going to work. So that sort of posture takes time, not only in the what we call the verbal aikido dojo, but like anyone who's done martial arts, you'll know it takes a long time to be able to use what you've learned in the dojo in the real world, so that the reflexes are actually there when you need them.
So one of the things that why I've practiced with you for such a long time is because I feel that the relationship between VA, verbal Aikido, and Aikido on the mat walk hand in hand. So already you've used words like posture, hugely important on the mat. You need to explain a bit more about what you mean off the mat. You've used the word space, again, incredibly important on the mat, but it has a slightly different context off the mat. So we should look at that too. I knew we'd go off at tangents. And the third one is attitude of mind. So you can know all the techniques in the world in Aikido, but unless your attitude is that you're looking to look after yourself, but also to protect your partner, it's just another sort of violent encounter.
Yeah.
You have to have that desire to
Right.
protect your partner and to end up with a positive outcome rather than, see, I put you down on the mat. So
This is
let's
yeah.
address posture.
Well, yeah, and this I think this comes back to one of those key things where people start comparing martial arts and things like that, and they say, "Oh yeah, Aikido doesn't work." And you get all these things, but of course, like you said, it depends on the person, but it also for me that's not comparable because if you it's comparing two things that have different objectives. And that's why we'll see, Aikido isn't in the Olympics because there's not this idea of winning. It's the idea of preserving both people. So that's why I find Aikido as a martial art is actually harder. You've got two objectives, not just one. Yeah, most martial arts have that idea of saying either, okay, yeah, you either defend yourself or you destroy the other person essentially. So you have a lot of that. Whereas Aikido, you've got two things you got to try and do, which is, yes, as you said, protect yourself and then look after the other person. So you've got two things going on there. So yes, there's no unless it's both we're both winners, but it's not that idea of dominating the other person. So that absolutely is essentially part of the posture, and that comes down to, I would say, our ego, and this idea of getting the upper hand, and it's something that it's hard to let go of, and I know that's an important It's important for our self construction to be to to feel good about ourselves. But yeah, it gets in our way. It absolutely gets in our way when it comes to relationships. And the essential of VA is really to it's a prioritized relationship. So prioritize relationship with yourself and the other and the universe, if you like. But essentially, that's that's what you're aiming at, and that's the priority here. It's not to come out on top. It's to preserve the relationship, your relationship with yourself, etc. So there's three postures in VA. There's the what we call posture one, which is the me, so which involves a little bit what we were talking about, is sort of gaining that space to be able to come back to center. If you don't know what center is, well, then think about what the opposite of center is. So you know that when you're not centered, when you've got that tension in your body, well, it's the opposite of that. So coming back to that, I know we've talked a lot about, and I'm sure you can go into greater detail than myself on that sense of being grounded, of being aware, being present, all these sort of aspects which kind of people can relate to. But it essentially, when you're talking about that sort of that me posture, that coming back to here, it's being able to connect with yourself and whatever emotions, and you know this better than anyone. The Aikido is the art of non-resistance. So even if there's strong emotions coming, it's not about resisting them. You're gonna give money to to a therapist later on down the road if you resist all these emotions. So it's about connecting with them and understanding, and really seeking to understand them. All the emotions that exist within us, they have a usefulness. They have a utility. They're there for a reason. Essentially it's to accompany both emotions in yourself, and then when you talk about the posture two, which is the second, if you see, it's nice to see it as a little triangle
I
that you
cut
kind
across
of
you
step
because
between.
I would say
Yeah.
that it's more of there are three moves, if you like. There's three stages of verbal
Mm,
Aikido. You've got the me, you've got the you, you've got the us.
yeah.
I'm more interested in, so when I'm talking about posture on the mat, I'm talking about literally how you stand, how you present yourself to the world and to whatever's in front of you. And I'd like you to give me just keywords. So when you think of posture and how that relates to yourself, what are the keywords that come to mind that you think would exemplify what posture means?
Presence, um, connectedness, and I want to say like a an intention to share centeredness.
Okay, good. So one of the things we do in Aikido is stretch words, and there are words that you've just given that we could have some fun stretching, but that's
Lovely.
for another day. All right, same thing with space. What do you mean by space?
There's okay, in essence, as we say in VA, all right, this is a good exercise. Uh, Emotional stability, safe distance, um, and uh, safe proximity to re-engage.
Okay, so I'm just going to explore that safe distance a bit. So on the mat, that's literally, well, you know you're in trouble when they're starting to get within strike range. It's not the same in verbal Aikido. So what do you mean by safe distance?
Well, uh, essentially this, so I can use more than keywords, yeah.
As long as keep it to
I'll,
essence if you can.
I'll try and keep it to S. I'll try and keep it at least to kind of brief Twitter-esque answers. Essentially, um, safe distance is this sense of knowing how knowing how centered you are so that you can re-engage meaningfully.
I like
Um,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's good. It's knowing that you're not in a place yet where you can engage, or that you can, at least if you engage, you're engaging in the right way. So if you need to buy yourself some time,
Absolutely. We do one of the moves in VA, one of the most essential moves is what we call a back step. And you can do it quickly, like we do that kind of just really quick centering, which is to just to give you that space to kind of return to something that resembles at least a centered state. But sometimes we call it a long back step, which can be any length from maybe 3 minutes. If you want to say, okay, let me call you back in 3 minutes, I just need a moment. Or you might say, I'm just going to go to the toilet. I'll be back in a second, and you go there and you a few breathing exercises so that you can re-engage. Or it can be up to, okay, listen, I'll talk to you next year at Christmas, and so it can be so it's about you finding that space to be able to, yeah, to re-engage in some sort of meaningful manner, knowing that we'll always, and that's one of my favorite quotes by Osensei Ueshiba, is that we're always kind of falling out of balance. We're always going to lose that sense of centeredness. But what we're working on is our ability to get back to it quickly, which is a lifelong path. Definitely.
it is good. All right. Okay, hang on a second. Okay, next. Oh, you've gone. Where's you gone? No, you haven't. Could you explain the core philosophy behind verbal Aikido and how it's inspired by the martial art of Aikido?
Well, we've touched on some of that already, but essentially the core philosophy. eh, Actually, well, yes, there's a lot, there's loads we can talk about here, but I guess, as I said, the core philosophy comes from the mouth of that 6-year-old, which is protect yourself, protect the other, and coming back to that idea of putting the relationship at the forefront of it. There's another few things in there that I think are definitely worthwhile exploring, and it's that no matter, and again, similar to Aikido, martial Aikido, is no matter what level you're at, doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you're eighth dan black belt in it, you're always working on how you can have smoother moves and use less energy to get to that protection of self and other. So I think that's a core thing, and specific. Is it that specific? I don't think it actually is that specific. It also relates to martial aikido. Is that all the exercises we do in VA specific definitely is are related to two things, which are self observation and intention. So no matter what exercise you're doing, whether it's a centering exercise, as we talked about, verbal stretching exercises, or you're on the mat, you're attempting to be in some sort of self-observation and noticing what's going on within you, being that presence that we talked about earlier, and what's your intention. And have you kind of diverged from that intention of either posture one, trying to connect with yourself, posture two, that sincere desire to understand the other person, and that posture three, that us looking for the bridges, looking for bridges that are going to enable that essentially that de-escalation in exchange, or for both people to feel understood.
Yeah. So one of the things that, again, I think is a similarity between what you're doing in verbal Aikido and more normal Aikido training on the mat is that you never know who's going to step onto your mat, and they're all unique. So you get people who are very shy and timid, you get people who have a bit of an ego, you get people who are a bit aggressive, um, and they're all coming because there's a recognition that maybe things are not as good as they could be. What is it about verbal Aikido you think that calms down the aggressive people and builds up the confidence of the timid people, and that we're all able to share those personal moments together?
Well, there's many factors, but I think the one that stands out a lot is it, well, it's a bi-directional one concerning understanding. And I think everybody knows this, is that, if there's something that you don't understand, the tension builds up. So you just imagine, you don't know why your computer is not working the way you want it to. Well, then the tension builds up and you're thinking, oh, why did I press the button? It worked yesterday, or what? All these sort of things are building up within you, and you don't understand it. And then, for example, I'd use a realistic example. Your son comes in and says, "Dad, just reboot the computer and you'll be fine." And you're like, "Oh yeah, why didn't I think of that?" And and then you just understand, okay, and you kind of you have a great understanding, and then you see, okay, it works. So in the future that's a good direction to go, or anything else. Or if he just says, okay, just press this button here, and you go, oh, okay, all right, it was that button. Sorry, yeah, I thought it was another. And so that the tension created by the lack of understanding, that you don't understand, brings you peace. It brings you closer to that peace. And the same is true when, so that's when you don't understand, but when you don't feel understood, it's like you're trying to explain something to, I don't know, your companion or a friend of yours, and they're just not getting it. And you're going, oh, and the tension's same thing. It's building up. You're going, how can you not see this? It's so easy. And then they go, oh, you mean yesterday? I thought you were talking about today. And they understand you, and you're like, yes. And the same tension that has built up, again, it's one of those, and there's many, but it's the most, common pathway to peace that you can find. It's that internal peace, because you feel understood. So whether it's you understand or you feel understood, that's these are key things. I mean, there's also relativity. There's a few other directions we can go in this, but essentially those two, that sense of feeling understood, that sense of understanding what's going on, they inevitably de-escalate exchanges. So it doesn't mean it's over, and there can be other things to explore, but those two are definitely key up there. They really, and we work on that, as you know, just kind of
Yeah. Okay. So
on
that
a general
relates kind
basis.
of to my next question, which is, is that you in your first book talked a lot about an inner smile, and it seems to me that whether you're overly aggressive or overly timid, you need to find that middle ground. So tell us about the inner smile.
Well, yeah, well, I use that term inner smile just so that, if people were in a situation where, they're aiming at finding that, I call it kind of a serene confidence. So you're confident, but you're not being all braggadocious about it. There's that sense of, so the smile isn't necessarily coming to the outside. So you're not, somebody maybe in a serious difficulty is verbally attacking you, and you're with your little, your smile that comes up in the corner of your lips. So that can contribute to further escalation. So the inner smile that I talked about in the first book really is this sense of, yeah, finding that place of peace within. That can sound kind of big, but it's a personal path, and it really is. As I said, it's that lifelong exploration of what is it that enables me. What are the stepping stones that enable me to return to that centered place? So that, again, coming back to that idea of distance, so that I can re-engage meaningfully with whatever. And this, it's so funny because it's not just, and this is why I love the philosophy of Aikido, is that it's not just about a person attacking me. It's when my printer doesn't work. It's when the key that I've put in my door for years now is just not turning. But whatever it is, these are just common things in life. And what we're aiming to do is to come back to that, because we know. I mean, and this is it's such an interesting one. It's that every if you've experienced this idea of dealing with a difficult situation from a centered place, you know that there's going to be a better result in the end. just, I mean, you're going to use less energy. You're not going to inflict difficulties or tension on other people because you're shouting and screaming about or throwing the keyboard across the room or whatever. That you're if you if you're dealing with something from that centered place, well, then from that sort of inner smile place, or at least having the intention to get there. It's not about being that Buddhist monk idea with, sitting on the top of a mountain just being completely zen about things. It's not that. And again, some people kind of give up on things because they think, oh, I'm not centered. But it's about having the intention to be centered, because we know that from that centered place, that's where other things are possible, and we miss out on seeing things if we're not in that centered place, because we're not as present as we could be. So it's having that intention to get back to that, at least as close as we can, to some sort of centeredness, serene confidence, call it what you will, but inner smile, I think, is kind of nice.
Yeah, I think that what occurs to me is that you're looking to be able to, um, rather than feel attacked, to have a curiosity about why you're being attacked, and to explore that with a curiosity rather than receiving the attack and being hurt by it. To be a bit more resilient and yeah, just see an attack as an opportunity really rather than as a threat.
Well, that's exactly what we call them when we open our dojos. Myself or any other senseis who are managing the dojo, we'll ask, what opportunities to practice have you had? So they're all opportunities to practice. And like I said, if it's your printer that's not working, well then question can be, okay, first of all, let me see if I can get as centered as I can here. And then that's posture one. So then you're into posture two, which is the other, essentially. So you're trying to, as you've said, I love that the word that you use there is curious. You're genuinely curious about, and so you got to step into that curious mode rather than going, why, the inevitable thing, and people talk about things, death and taxes are inevitable. It's also inevitable in life that things will not go your way. That's inevitable. It's going to happen. So when it happens, the question is, how can you manage that in a way that that is as constructive, or as we said before, is using as little energy and you've had smoother moves as possible. So that's kind of my lifelong interest has always been, that is to say, how can I manage what's coming at me in a way that uh, yeah, is as centered as possible. But like I said, so we get centered, and then, as you said, you get curious. So what's going on here? What do I need to learn? What is it that I can understand? And then my life will actually be better after that because I've learned something. So curiosity, 100% key, and so whether it's your printer, then you can transfer that over to the person, even though they seem like they're attacking you. It is, as you said, it's an opportunity to practice. And I can tell you, once you get into the I guess the fold, or the moves that we do via the posture that we talked about earlier, and you just use a few moves and you see that whew, it de-escalates immediately. I mean, there's that sense of almost elation that, wow, I used a few moves there and it could have gone in so many different directions, but it de-escalated. So there's that really sense of self-mastery that comes into play. And I guess once you get a taste for that, then you'll be not to say that you're going to go out and start provoking people, looking for fights and saying, okay, yeah, you're throwing something at someone so that they'll throw it back at you. No, not that, but definitely that when things happen, that you'll definitely kind of slip in to that posture, which takes training, which takes that, as I said, the development of reflexes. But once you get the taste for it, uh, there's you'll start to see the world a little bit differently.
Yeah. So again, sparking off what you've just said, we call it verbal Aikido, but actually we should be calling it listening Aikido because you spend more time listening really to try and figure out what's going on than you do actually talking yourself. So talk us through that process of why listening is so important and when it comes into play.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny you say that because some people have said it's more mental Aikido or it's more this Aikido. Yeah, I mean, I got had to choose something, I guess, but definitely listening. Yeah, it's one of the things that I recommend to practitioners. I know it's setting the bar pretty high, but it's to in conflictual situations to aim for that ratio, that 4 to 1, 80 to 20 ratio, in that don't expect the other person to necessarily listen as much as you're listening. We train really hard in Vienna. I push people really very far in their neutrality of their listening, and we go much further than what we call active listening. Active listening is great in conversations, and it can be pretty good if you're a therapist or something like that to reformulate. But it can actually get in your way. It can if you're reformulating something that somebody has said in a conflict, they can very easily throw back. That's not what I said. You're changing my words, or all these sort of things can. It's a risk. It's a risk. Um, you could place a good one and it can create de-escalation. But the reason that I push people so hard in to aim for this neutral listening is that inevitably, so I'll push them to like 150% of what they need, so that when it does come to the conflict, that even if they're at 90% of what they need, that's already kind of high enough. But I do recommend that they aim for allowing the other person to take 80% of the talk time, and as a good practitioner to be concise with your words, and you're actually more effective when you're concise with your words. So uh, the listening is it's a really interesting part. I'm still learning, developing my listening, and I know that's so. We've talked about getting being centered as a lifelong path. Developing our listening skills is a lifelong path. I think we need an enormous amount of humility regarding these aspects of our paths. But so listening as a tool, I mean, it just kind of goes without saying. If we've covered the idea of understanding, the thing about listening, often that people kind of get not they don't trip up on so much as they kind of forget that it's not about being patient. It's not about just letting the other person finish so that we can say what we have to say. For me, true listening is being open to the possibility that what the other person says can change us in some way, change our view, can widen our understanding. But if we're not open to that possibility, we're not listening. Maybe hearing what they're saying, but that listening, it's such a key thing, and that's what creates the us. It's part of that us. We also haven't. We should make sure that we're not forgetting ourselves. Definitely not. But we can be more, as I said, more concise, and again, that's part of even the verbal stretching training, is to be able to come down and say, in the essence, what is our position in as compact a way as possible.
Okay, so in order to listen, we need to and receive what the other person is saying fully.
As fully as we
We
can.
we
Yeah.
have one essential tool to find out, which is to ask questions, and knowing what questions to answer. We'll just talk about questions.
Sure. Well, the idea of the questions is sometimes one that uh, if you can imagine those disco balls, and they've got all these different facets, and I think when you're approaching another person to try to understand them, every person has all these different facets. So these are what we call our posture two techniques, which is often questioning. It's trying to understand the person, and yet you need to have. It goes without saying, that sincere curiosity. So you might approach that other person trying to say, okay, so what do you mean when you say incompetent, for example? What do you mean? And so what would you prefer? And then you might say, so where's this all coming from? And where's this lead? So you're actually, what you're doing is you're getting close to that disco ball, and you're looking at this part, and you're looking at that part, and you're looking at all these different parts until you find an opening that you can potentially connect with. And sometimes you might get right in there on the first move and whew, it'll de-escalate. So you might say something like, so how can I help you with this? And that may suddenly create something that other person was looking for, but they just didn't know how to formulate it. And so once you've explored, and sometimes, as you know, you've done it on the mat as well. Sometimes you're asking this question, you're trying to understand that, then you come back to yourself and your position. You also need to share where you're coming from too, so that that maybe there's information that they need to know. So you're exploring around, and then there's that moment where there's a potential us, and we kind of become one in that moment. And that, again, that's one of those key I guess, yeah, like what we call energy shifts in the exchange, where there's a de-escalate, a really notable de-escalation. Sometimes it's smoother, but sometimes there's like that lightning move where whew, it just brings it down immediately. So the more questions, we do a lot of open questions, but not exclusively. But the more you can go in different directions. There's just techniques. The more possibilities you have, and you know yourself, you kind of get a feel for where it might go. We also have lots and lots and lots of different kata that you can explore with, but you should never. And I think this is important with the questions. You should never use a kata kind of mechanically. You know, you need to always have that presence of mind to stay open to say, okay, I know this kata. I might say, so what do you mean? What would you prefer? What would you recommend? Or, you might have a few moves like that. But if the person kind of goes off in another direction, you need to be able to flow with that and step out of the kata, even if you need to come back to it later. But step out of that to be able to be present with the other person. Otherwise, you sound like a robot.
Yeah, well, there's two more Aikido words, presence and flow. It's really crucial on the mat and crucial off it too. Um, so another word that springs to mind is awareness. So if you are aware of what's going on, really, really taking on board what's out there, what's in front of you right now, you get more information. The more information you have, the more likely it is that you come up with the right solution. And that strikes me as being really at the heart of what verbal Aikido is about. It's about gathering information so that you gain an understanding of what the solution might be to this particular problem that you're facing.
I was going to say 100%, but I'm actually going to say 50% for the simple reason that yes, yes, but that's your posture too. You also need to have that awareness of self and where you're at. So that's the other 50% of it. And that's what it is. Like when we
Sure.
say posture one, posture two, me, you. So one plus two equals three, me plus you potentially equals that us. So and there's a lot of people, and I've chosen it was a deliberate choice when I started VA was to work not exclusively but a lot with medical, social, education, and these are sectors where you're going to be confronted with people who are there. It's servicing, so you see, you're helping the other people. So these people are very altruistic often, and it's their intention anyway. So one of the things is they're going to forget about themselves. And even if you look at the first book, you'll see that there's a lot of what we say posture two techniques where I myself was kind of forgetting about, that awareness of self, awareness of your own needs, awareness of what feelings are going on inside you, awareness of your preferences. All these sort of things are key to know about yourself. So again, one of the other reasons we do a lot of verbal stretching is to kind of that self understanding that is again another lifelong path. But definitely the awareness, yes, needs to be directed outside, but it needs to be that whole thing of uh, you know of being able to express where you're at. And that's what we say is like if you just say things to keep the peace, to I'm going to de-escalate this by just being interested in the other person, but I'll forget about myself right now. Well, there's a conflict that's going to start inside, and then that escalates, and that can explode
Yeah.
at various moments where you probably least expect it, or someone
Yeah.
else finds it. exaggerated for what's actually happened, but because it's built up and built up. So make sure you're not, just concealing things to keep the peace. The awareness needs to go both ways. Yeah.
Absolutely. Awareness is an internal as well as an external process. If you don't know where you're at, how on earth are you going to work out where the other person is at? So it starts at home. And I always say to my students, we're not looking for one-on-one to make two. We're looking for one-on-one to make one, which sounds a bit Zen, but that's what the us is all about. The us
Yeah,
means, you've
I
got
love it.
two beings that come together and can walk the same path. So I prefer to put it that way.
Nice.
Okay, so you started off by telling us that verbal Aikido was something that almost people asked you to create for them. But what's been the biggest personal challenge for you in developing your own verbal Aikido? What were the things that you found most difficult about it?
That's a great question. Well, I I think that as much as people will use VA, and I do the trainings with people in professional contexts, and it just gives great benefit, and they're able to go home and have use less energy, and be able to devote their energy to the things that they love and the people that they love, etc. I think it is its biggest impact is in the real relationships that count for you. So I'm talking family and the people that you usually spend a lot of your time with. Your question kind of made me think of I think for me, which is my I think it's one of the things I'm most proud of in my life is my relationship with my son. I've it's a son that obviously went through all the stages of adolescence, and it, it's definitely a challenge, to there's sort of hormones, there's difficulties, their bodies are transforming, they don't know what's going on. There's all these new questions that are coming to them. They need to identify. And I heard this really interesting thing a while ago uh, uh, about these hormones, that they were in fact from early humans, or to make sure that there was no, what they call it, interbreeding, is that it is absolutely natural for the adolescent to be in rejection of parents. And so that they would leave the tribe and go off somewhere else. And so that idea of resistance and needing to find one's own identity, and to pushing back on parental positions is 100% natural part of the evolution of children. But I heard this later after my son had grown up. So um, it, I think what was really interesting for me in this and I had to give my son a lot of credit, because he kind of grew up with this, and there was obviously moments where he was kind of in resistance of it, but in essence he really did use and take a lot of it on. And I can say that for myself, it was such a revealing thing when, so I would get maybe upset, or a little bit agitated about certain things. So as any parent, you're going to go in and say, how come this isn't, whatever, this isn't done. And so he would respond with VA to me, and he'd do it well. He has such great posture. And so, when I'd hear him using VA on me, I'd be like, so he'd say, so I'd say something, and he'd go, so okay, and so how do you feel about that? And so I hear him say that with genuine curiosity for my position, but I knew he was protecting himself, but at the same time protecting me. And then that kind of made me think, do I want to attack this person that I love? No. And so that made me kind of take a step back and be able to say, okay, so my little back step, a little bit of centering to say, okay, here's what's going on. Here's what I need you to do. And it's kind of urgent. Can I count on you? And he'd be like, yeah, sure, get up and all. And that would be it. So I think that's the relationships that matter most to us are the ones that are the most difficult. They are. It's kind of easy to manage. You know, someone on the street might say something to you, and you're like, well, have I got time to okay, go ahead. Okay, I'm listening, and you might if you feel like practicing, you know, if you see it as an opportunity to practice. But the closer a person is to you, the harder it becomes to actually to manage it. So just generally speaking, people in in families, there's so many different sort of personalities that you're going to encounter. People evolve in different ways, and just simply managing those on a especially if on a regular basis, is people you're in contact with regularly, uh, and you've certain habits. And I think that was kind of one of my challenges was to step out of my old habits of being the peacekeeper in the sense of just saying things diplomatically so that nobody's hurt, but to actually be able to kind of take a bull by the horns and say, okay, actually I need to express my needs here. That was hugely important, and it took me a long time. And I think you know this yourself. I know you were one of the people encouraging me at one stage to say, "Look, yeah, your posture one there. Where is it?" To absolutely to develop that within myself. So I'm still learning. I'm still absolutely learning, but it's always kind of shown itself to be greatly beneficial at the end, even though it's tough. It's tough.
Okay. You've maybe touched on this, but can you think of one particular instance that was really challenging and that you navigated your way through? And I'll expand it and say, well, maybe you can think of a story one of your students has told you where you thought, wow.
Um, could probably do both. You know what really stands out for me is actually it's not necessarily that I'm necessarily conscious of it, but it's when people, or for example, my son would come up to me and say, "Oh, you were practicing there," and it because it has become a reflex that I say, "Oh yeah, I guess I was," and he as an external observer can kind of see or recognize the moves or see the posture and see things that could potentially escalate, just de-escalate. I had a situation a couple of years ago when I moved into my new place. I have an apartment and there's a balcony, and as I obviously have a neighbor underneath, and I'd asked my son to actually clean the balcony and uh, to brush off. There was some residue of some birds that had decided to make a nest there, but I yeah, I had people coming around, and essentially at one stage, I just when I thought a friend getting to my door, opened the door with a big smile, expecting to see my friend, and there's my neighbor, furious. I mean, absolutely furious because everything that my son had brushed off the balcony had gone onto her balcony. So, understandably furious, and uh, I can't remember exactly all the things that I said, but I remember at one stage her saying to me, "Don't you try your charm on me, Mr. Archer." And I was like, "So what would you prefer?" And I just remember the kind of a bewildered look on her face going, "What's going on?" And I was obviously helpful in saying, "Listen, maybe I can help you. You can go down right now, or would you prefer tomorrow?" And I remember she walked off kind of feeling a little disoriented, but it didn't escalate in a direction that she maybe thought it might have, or I wasn't in this kind of just, "Oh, I'm sorry," and submissive form. There's definitely an assertiveness that you practice in VA, but it's that kind of compassionate kind. So uh, and I remember closing, the next for the rest of the story is the next day she came up and she was apologetic, and she's saying, "I'm really sorry. I got home, and I was a hard day at work. It was Friday, it was the end of the and she's and now we're best of friends. She has the key for my apartment. It's but I remember as I closed the door, Sean, my son, is essentially saying, wow, bit of practice there. That could have gone any direction. And and like I said, it's what's important is that you're prioritizing relationships. And that was the intention in that, and it definitely brought its its fruit, if you like, on that. But there's one of the things from another student that struck me was it wasn't, again, it wasn't necessarily the words that were said, but it's the attitude that you talk about, this attitude on the mat, and we're trying to, that's what we're trying to do with VA, is to make the world the mat, essentially. So uh, when one of the students from Paris actually was saying, it took about 9 months or something, but they were in Gare de Lyon, so the train, the main one of the main train stations in Paris, and somebody had got a little bit aggressive, and her simple reaction was, excellent, an opportunity to practice. And so it was that posture, that attitude, to say, not to shy away from stuff which she definitely would have done, or just kind of, almost got into a little internal ball and just waited for things to pass. No, she actually transformed. But it took 9 months. It took that regular practice to have the confidence to go towards, rather than to shy away or to go towards in an attacking form. So that, I remember that just really standing out for me.
I think we've done a pretty good job, Luke, of covering what Verbal Aikido is about. Any final thought that you would like to offer as being important that we've missed?
Um,
What would be your advice to the world?
okay, here's a simple thing. It's kind of, I think it's pretty simple, and I think it's accessible to all, and it's something that, we talked about self-observation and intention. So there's a really nice visual thing, if you can imagine it, that there's this sense of green, yellow, orange, red on a kind of a gauge of how centered or not centered you are. And it's this simple idea of knowing that, me and you are talking here, it's obviously green. There's no tension at all. But, sometimes somebody will say something, or something will not go as you hoped it to go, and you'll get into that little yellow. And that's kind of okay, but if it starts going into orange, and you all know where that orange is, it's just before the explosion. If it gets that orange, you need to take a step back. You need to give yourself that space to kind of say, oh, how can I get at least back to yellow before I continue this exchange? So kind of just to have that self-observation of noticing when you get into the orange, so that you're not going into the red. And I think that's kind of a nice kind of visual that you can feel it, and just notice in yourself when you have that tension. Where is it? Is it in your shoulders? Is it like a little belt around your forehead? Is it something feeling in your gut? Whatever it is for you, that's what you need to pay attention to. But yeah, absolutely, self observation, and intention. It really is. It's the key to developing this practice.
Okay. Well, I've enjoyed this chat. I hope you have too. I know that you're just about to publish a new book, and I'd like to suggest that we have a second session where you talk to us about the book. So, are you on for that?
Absolutely. Can't wait.
Great.